Chapter number 4 of PHP 7. We're going to look at functions, PHP functions. We're also going to look at PHP arrays. So those are the two things that we're going to be focusing on in this chapter. So let's jump right in and see where we got. So just like C and C++, PHP also supports object-oriented features. It's actually an object-oriented programming language, and therefore it supports functions. Now, again, in PHP, we have built-in functions, and we also have user-defined functions. User-defined functions are functions that you create. So we have built-in functions and user-defined functions. Now, a function is a block of code that can be used repeatedly, in a program, because you can call it over and over again. Most of the time, a function performs some specific task. Now, a function cannot execute when the page is loaded. A function has to be called for the function to be executed. So this is how we define a function in PHP. We use a keyword function. Then we give the function a name. It has to be an acceptable identifier. Then we have these brackets that are used to carry some parameters. Parameters are just variables if you're passing something to the function. Then you'll have an opening curly bracket and a closing curly bracket to denote the beginning of the function and the end of the function. Then of course in between you'll have some lines of code, one or more lines of code. So that is the syntax for defining a function. Quite simple. Okay, let's look at this example here. Here, we define a function by using the function keyword, then we give it the name write message. Now, the brackets here are empty, meaning we are not passing any value to this particular function. And when we call this function, this line is going to be executed. So it's going to print out on the screen, hello world. Now, you call a function by writing the name of the function and specifying the parameters. So if it has 0 parameters, then you just specify the brackets with nothing inside. Then of course you have to close with a semicolon. So when this particular program is executed, then we're going to get this as we're going to get hello world as the output. So that is how we define a function, and that is how we call a function in PHP. Now, the other important concept in relation to functions is the concept of arguments. Now, information can be passed to functions through arguments. Now, an argument is just a variable. Now, it is specified after the function name inside the brackets. You can add as many arguments as you want. You'll have to separate each argument from the next using a comma. So let's have a look at this function. This function is called family name, and it receives one argument. So you can see that an argument is simply a variable. So we just define it using the $sign, then the name of that particular argument. So it's just a variable. So we are creating a variable here called fname. Then inside the function, we print fname. It's what we've declared here. It's the parameter. So we print it. Now we can call family name several times while passing it some value. So when you call it the first time, we are passing it Johnny, and therefore this is going to be printed out. When we call it the second time, we are passing it that name, third time that name, that name, that name. You can see that with the function, you can be able to call to execute the same code repeatedly, but with different values. So that is what an argument really gives you. Instead of writing echo, then Johnny, ref, whatever there, then head, then still. So you simply use a function, and then you call it as you pass it the different names. If it's the same, if they're sharing, for example, the same surname, like this example is trying to portray. So that is what you call an argument. So in this example, we're just passing one argument, which is the first name. Why did I press escape? Okay, so let's go ahead. Now in this second one, we are passing two arguments. So the name again is family name, but we are passing the fname. Then you see, if we want to pass another argument, we separate with a comma. Then the next one here is the year, and we're printing them in this particular statement. And so their name and the year they were born. So when you declare two arguments, then you have to pass two. So you can see when we call, we pass two like that. And when you run this code, then this will be the output. This will be the output. I hope it makes sense. Okay. Now we already mentioned this. During the first topic, that PHP is a loosely typed language, meaning it will automatically associate a data type to a variable depending on the value you assign to the variable. Now, this also brings another problem. Since the data types are not set in a strict sense, you can do things like adding a string to an integer without causing an error. So we're going to see an example of that. However, in PHP 7, type declarations were added. So this gives us an option to specify the data type expected when declaring a function, and you do so by enabling the strict requirements. So when you do that, then it will throw a fatal error if you're trying to, for example, add an integer to a string, because it's going to be a type mismatch. So the following example, we try to add a number and a string without strict requirements, and it's gonna work. Look here. So here we have a function called add numbers. We are declaring int a. So we are specifying the data type of the variable a, of the argument a, as integer, then comma, then int b. So both arguments are integers. But when we call the function, we want to echo whatever it's going to return, and the return is actually an expression. It's going to return a plus b. So Here we want to pass it a value 5, which is actually an integer. So this will be passed to this variable. So no problem, because it's a whole number and this is an integer. Good. But the next argument we pass it is actually a string. So that is going to be passed here. So now we are passing a string to an integer. You see, that's not right. But since strict is not enabled, then these 5 days, whatever we're passing it, the string, is going to be the concept of typecasting is going to be converted into an integer. So it's going to be converted into an integer automatically by PHP. And therefore, when you run this program, the output is going to be 10, because this string 5 days is going to be converted to an integer. So the sum is still gonna work. While that might appear to be nice, it's not very advisable, because it can bring unexpected errors in your program, which might be very difficult to troubleshoot. So what happens? Wow, let me just pull this down a little bit. Seems to have gone up. Okay. That should be visible. Okay, so what happens if you want that not to work? Then you use the strict requirement. Now you use the strict requirement by using the declare function, declare. Then you use this strict underscore types is equals to 1, like that. So if you do that and we try to pass a string to an integer, then we're going to get a fatal error. Unquote type error. Argument 2 passed to the function add numbers must be of the type integer, but you have given a string. And then it's going to tell you on which line and on which page, like that. So that is what the strict type is used to do. So again, in order to declare the strict type, you use this code, this line of code. So don't forget that. Now, strict declaration can make code easier to read, and it forces things to be used in the intended way. So that's the advantage. That's the advantage. So many people who accuse PHP of being a lousy and a bogus language, one of the things they were accusing PHP of was actually this one, the fact that it's loosely typed. And therefore it can bring unexpected errors which are very hard to troubleshoot. But from PHP 7, you can be able to declare the strict type. Okay, now with functions, you can declare a default argument value. Now let's see how you do that. In this example, we have a function called setHeight. Then we've declared an integer variable min height as the only argument. But after declaring it, we've also assigned it using the assignment operator a value 50. Now look what happens. Inside the function, we are echoing the min height. You can see we are echoing the min height here. Then a break to force it to go to the next line. Now, if we call the function setHeight and pass it a value, then the output is gonna be 350. The min height it's gonna print is 350. Otherwise, if we call a function and don't pass anything to it, then it's gonna print the default value. The default value. So that's the work of the default value. But if we pass it 135, then it's gonna print 135. If we pass it 80, it's gonna print 80. So that is what we call a default argument value. Okay, so that is it about that. We go ahead to returning values. This is another very important concept. Now, a function can return a value, or it can fail to return a value. What that means is that it's optional. It's optional for a variable to either return or not return a value. Now, you can see here, we have a function called sum. We've declared two integer arguments, int x and int y. Then we are summing them here and storing them on another variable, local variable z. Then we are returning z. So this is what we call the return statement. Return statement. So if we do echo, then we call the function and pass it. We pass 5 to x, we pass 10 to y. Then it's gonna print 15, and because of the return statement. And remember, we've already printed this as a string, so that is what is gonna print this. But this call to the function sum 5, 10 is what is going to print this 15. So similarly, for the next echo statement here, this bit is gonna print this bit up to there. Then this call is gonna pass 7 to x and 13 to y, and the value that is gonna be returned is the sum of those two values. So that is what we call returning a value. Now, in this example, we did not specify the data type of the returned value. So in the following slide, we want to learn how to do that. How do you specify the data type of the returned value? So how to do that is like this. After the parenthesis, the closing parenthesis of the parameters, you use a full colon, then you specify the data type of the returned value. So here in this example, the returned value is going to be a float. So when you do here, return a plus b, so even if you pass to a just 1, here we are passing 1.2 to a, we are passing 5.2 to b. But even if you pass just 1 and 5, because you've specified the float, the returned value to be a float, then it's gonna give, if let me just write it. If we do here, if we do echo, excuse me, wow. If you do echo, then you call the function numbers, then you pass it 1, space 2. After comma, it's always a good practice to do space. So if you do that, the output is gonna be 3.0. It's gonna be a float. It's going to be a float because we specified the returned value to be a float. Otherwise, if we don't specify this float, then calling add is just going to give us 3 and not 3.0. I hope that is clear. Okay, and that is it about functions. So now we look at PHP arrays. Now, an array will store multiple values in a single variable. Most of the time, we use it to store a list of items. For example, a list of car names. So, instead of declaring 3 different variables to hold these different brands, you can declare a single array that will hold all of them. The problem with this is that sometimes you have so many values, and therefore declaring each single variable is not going to be the most appropriate way of doing it. The other way, of course, is naming variables is not so easy, and therefore creating different variables might also be a challenge. And naming variables and giving them names that make sense. As you continue to program, you're going to realize that it's not as easy as it may sound. So just use a single array for that, because now, what if you have 300 cars, 300 different? Are you going to declare 300 different variables? It's not efficient. So the solution for that is to create an array, because an array can hold many values under a single name, and you can access the values by referring to the index number of the array. Now, just the basics of an array, some of which I'm sure most of you know. So normally when we explain the array, the data structure of an array, we normally do it using a table. So for example, this is called a one-dimensional array. So for example, in this one, for example, we've stored here Toyota. Then we've stored here Subaru. Then we have stored here BMW. Then we have stored here but why has Mac-X been trending? I don't know. Okay, so there are several things you're supposed to understand about an array. One of them is what is called the index of an array. Index of an array. And the index of an array is simply the position of different values in the array. Like that. That's what you call the index of the array. Now, in this particular example, this position here is called index 0. Index 0. So that is not an O, it's a 0, and then this one here, index 1, and so on and so forth. So the most important thing to remember is that the indices begins from 0 and not from 1. So Mac-X here is on index 3. So that's the index. The other thing that is important in an array is the size of the array. So the size of the array, the size of the array. This is the number of number of items in the array. So for example, the size of this array here is 4. And the size of this array, because 1, 2, 3, 4. So the size of this array is 4. So those are some of the important things to know about an array. Okay. So how do we create an array in PHP? By using the array function. In PHP we have indexed arrays, we have associative arrays, and we have multi-dimensional arrays. So you must understand each one of them. So we begin by indexed arrays. It's called an indexed array because the keys are numbers. The keys are numbers. The indices are defined by a number. So the index of an array is also called the key. The key. So key 0, key 1, key 2, something like that. Now, this is how we define an index array. So we just create a variable called cars, then we say equals to array. So the array function. Then we give it the cars separated by comma. So this is index 0, index 1, and index 2. Or key 0, key 1, and key 2. So if you want to print, so this is one of the ways in which you can declare this one. This is how you can declare an indexed array, or you can use this way, one by one, like this. So cars 0 is equals to Volvo, cars 1 is equals to BMW, cars 2 is equals to Toyota. So you can do it in one of these ways. Okay, so this is just an example. So cars, then array, like that. Then we can print echo I like, and so that's gonna print out this. Okay, then how do you get the size of the array? The size of the array is also called the length of the array. Now we have an inbuilt PHP function to find out the size of the array. It's called the count function. This function is important because at times when you're retrieving information from the database, from a database table, you want to use the count to find out if any results was returned. As I told you, when you use the MySQL select statement, whatever is returned to PHP is an array. So sometimes you want to use the count to find out if any data was returned from the database. And now you count the length of the array, and if it's 0, it means nothing has been returned. If it's greater 1 or greater than 1, then it means something has been returned. So it's a very important function, the count function. So in this example, we declare an array called cars. We give it the values Volvo, BMW, and Toyota. Then we simply use count, the count function, and we give it the array cars. So if we echo it, then it's gonna give us 3, because this array has 3 values. So that's what we call the size of the array, or the length of the array. Okay, so how do you loop through? How do you display the values that have been saved in an indexed array? Normally we use the for loop for this. So here we are creating an array called car, assigning it those 3 car brands, and then we are finding out the length of the array by using the count function. So we use the for loop. So we declare a variable x, we initialize it to 0. We're initializing it to 0 because x is what we are going to use here. We want x to begin at 0, and we know that the index of the array begins at 0. So cast 0 is going to print out Volvo. Then the condition is x must be less than the array length. Remember, the array length is the size of the array, and we've used the count function for that. Then we have the increment here. So the output of this code is going to be this. This is going to rotate 3 times from 0 to 2. And every time it's going to break, it's going to add a new space. So that's why each of these is beginning on a new line. Okay. So that is it about indexed arrays. Now we come to associative arrays. The difference between indexed arrays and associative arrays is that the indices on associative arrays are named. So the keys are named. We use named keys. So here we are creating a variable age, which is an array actually. We are creating an array age, and then we call the array function. Then this is not a value. This is an index. So we name the first index Peter, and we give it a value 35 using this particular assignment operator. So the index Peter has the age of 35. The index Ben has the age of 37. The index Joe has the age of 43. So you can do that in one line like that, or you can do it like this. So this is just an example of that. Same code, by the way. And therefore, if we do Peter is, then age, and we name the index Peter, then it's going to print the age of Peter. Is that clear? I hope so. Okay, so how then do we loop through an associative array? Now, because associative arrays are named and they don't have the key values 0, 1, 2, etc., etc., we cannot use a for loop to loop through an associative array. For that, we have the for each loop. So that is how we use the for each loop. So we have an array called age. It's an associative array, as you can see, because we are giving the name of the index and the value. Name of the index and the value. Name of the index and the value. So here we want to say the array age. We want to save it. We want to save the key. So this is going to save the key on a variable called x, and the value on a variable called x underscore value. So if we echo here, key is equals to x, then this is going to print us the name of the key, and value is going to print us the value, and therefore, and after that, we're going to print a break. And therefore, if we run this code, the output is going to be like this. So I'll give you a minute to take that in. Excuse me. Okay. So we also have multi-dimensional arrays. So we have 2D and we also have 3D. So with multidimensional arrays, then you have something like this. So this is a 2D array. So this index here is 0, 0. The next one here is 0, 1. Then here, for example, is index 1, 0. And here is index 1, 1. And here it's index 2, 0. And here it is index 2, 1, etc., etc. So that is what we call a 2D array. So we also have a 3D array. So please spare some time and read about multidimensional arrays on the site W3 Schools. Excuse me. Okay. Then an important skill is knowing how to sort arrays. Now, the elements of an array can be sorted in alphabetical or numerical order, either in descending or ascending order. Luckily, it's easy to sort them because we have predefined inbuilt PHP functions. The first one is called sort. Sort is used to sort arrays in ascending order using the index. I think so. Then we have R sort. So this is the reverse sort. So it's used to sort in descending order. Then we have A sort. So for associative. So used to sort associative arrays. So A sort for associative arrays in ascending order according to the value. Then K sort, again for associative arrays in ascending order, but according to the key. Remember, associative arrays have a key and a value. Then AR, you might have already guessed it right. AR is the opposite of A sort. So simply sort in descending. Whenever we have R is for reverse according to value. Then KR sort is descending, yes, but according to the key. So that is how you sort. So these are just examples. So when we use sort cars, which is this array, then it's going to sort in ascending order. So we're going to begin with B, then T, then V. Then the next one is on numbers. This example is on numbers. So if you do sort numbers, so it's going to do in ascending again from the smallest all the way to the largest. Oh, this example, these were supposed to be R sort. Sorry, so these are supposed to be R sort. So here we have R sort. So please remember that it's supposed to be R sort. So if you use R sort, you're gonna sort it in descending. So it's gonna begin with V, then T, and then B, in descending order. Similarly here, This is R sort. So that is R sort. It's gonna sort it from in descending order from the largest to the smallest. Okay. And then now we have the associative array. So A sort. So this is an associative array. So for A sort, it's gonna sort according to the value. Yes, according to the value. So in ascending order. So 37, 43. Not really. According to the key, rather. According to the key. A sort according to the key. I'm not sure. Is this example correct? Okay, let's just look at let's go back. Okay, so A sort will sort in ascending order according to the value. Yeah, it's supposed to be according to the value. Excuse me. Okay. So this example is not correct. These examples are not correct. I think I mixed them up a little bit. I apologize for that. So you might need to have a look at that again on your own. So please do so because they are not correct. They're not correct. So when you have time, look at A sort, K sort, AR sort, and KR sort. Then I'll try and rectify. I think I might have mixed up a little bit when I was doing these slides. Otherwise, thank you very much. If you have any question, please remember to put it on the comment section below, and I'll always get time to respond. Otherwise, asanteni sana.